start with the melody, which is coming out of some Play with Captain plugins. And I added a plug and also cool lead to it. And basically there's DST on top of everything to squeeze it, and then some atmospheres. And now let's see the build-up melody, which is the one that kicks us into the drop. You can hear there's a pretty cool melody similar to the other one. And then we have sidechain, and we can see how much processing I made. It's like a lot of EQ and compression. And then we have some bass grouping to make it more powerful. And all together with the build-up it sounds like that. There's a powerful snare, and then we go into the drop. And as you can hear now, the drop is really the catchy melody which kicks you into the drop. You can hear a lot of layers, and I had to make a lot of space for the different sounds. But the most important piece is really the processing of the group. And to start with an EQ, I carved out some sides and made some slight boosts. And what happens next is I put some OTT, a little bit of glue compression as well. One more EQ to finalize the cuts on the mids and on the sides to create the space between the synths and the kick and the bass, which are the three main elements of the track. And finally, I just put some compression again to level up everything in the mid side. And this is how it sounds all together. Without and with. And now let's check the bass. And the bass you can hear is a sub plus another sound which layers on top. So the sub, very simple to creating the energy in the low end. And then the synth bass on top. And what we can see is that I had to make EQ to create space in the very lows, cutting out the rumble. I'd also made compression to keep the lows tight in the low end. And then I put a limiter at the very end, all together with the kick, because the kick itself and the bass needs to be providing the power to the track. So you'll see the kick is just shaped slightly with some transient shaper. We have the Cashmere Essential kick with some pressure and compression. And a very important piece, sidechain, the opposite of a sidechain actually. I'm cutting out the kick to make sure that it doesn't clash with the bass. And if we check kick and the bass together, we can see what I mean in the bass. So we have the sidechain on the bass, which is basically the opposite envelope of what I had on the kick. And then what I did was really putting a limiter in the group between the kick and the bass, so we can get some additional loudness. It's just, let's say, perceived, because basically I'm not boosting. You can hear it's using the 1-to-1 feature of Pro L. Without it, it sounds very loud. With it, it remains on the same volume that I had as an input. And this is quite important for a track like this. It gives the power. And now let's move into the drums. And for the drums, it's very, very simple. We have some clap and snares, and then we add some hats as well. And then we have some top on the left and on the right to make sure that we create full drum loop. And that's pretty much. And then we have parallel processing to the group. We have saturation. We have transient shaping to give a little bit more crispness and reduce a bit the length of the sounds. And then we have the drum bass, and finally just some slight EQ to carve out space in the very low end. We have some small effects, not a lot, just some crashes and a bit of uplifters. And we're heading into the final piece of that one, which is gonna be the mastering. So let's hear the build up. And now we're ready for the mastering. So when we talk about mastering, first of all, I like to bounce things. And I start with an EQ, and the EQ itself, it's just cutting out some rumble on the low end, and it's also cutting down some sides. In that track specifically, I didn't want sides in the very low frequencies of the track. Then we have some excitement and imaging. This is imager first, so it's just make width on the mid-range and slightly in the top range, and also we're reducing the width on the low part of the track. And then we have stabilizer, which is just taking out basically some more energy on the low end. And then we have some exciter here, so saturation actually, coming from Ozone. On this one I wanted to try out Ozone 10 mostly. So without, it sounds like this, and with, it sounds a little bit more saturated, I would say. And we can hear the difference of the exciter on the main bands, the mid band, and also the high band. And then the next one is more saturation, and this makes a huge difference because I usually have my mix down very low in volume. So you can hear without and with makes a significant difference, you can hear. And as you can see, I'm not compensating the input boost because I need to move into a higher volume range for my track before going into the final stages. So the next one would be actually some more Ozone, actually a dynamic compressor. So what I'm doing here is just trying to keep all the sounds in control, not overdoing it, so it's not adding any gain. I'm gain matching. I'm just giving a tiny bit of compression to glue all the things together. And it is basically just before moving into the final EQ, where I am removing out some more sides. But I'm using a shelf here, so I'm not cutting drastically, and I'm cutting the rumble instead, so below 30 Hz more or less, and also the very highs. And then the next one is a dynamic EQ, which I'm using to give a little boost to the highs. So it just adds some air to the final top frequencies of the track, and without it sounds like this, and with it, it's just very subtle. And then we have clipping, and clipping is done very chirurgically, so just a little bit. You can see the red here is where I am cutting down, shelving the envelopes and keeping the transients, so I can squeeze it more powerful with the maximizer now. And the maximizer, it starts to get very loud, so we'll have to turn down the volume slightly. And we can hear the difference it makes. We are -9 now. Without the maximizer, we're gonna be like probably -17, 16, something like this. We can see now 9, and then we can move, and it's gonna be like -17, something like this. Yeah. So it makes a lot of difference without distortion, and this is quite important. Now the next step is limiting. And basically I'm using a preset from Pro L, the potentially super loud, just a bit of gain, just to get 2/3 dB of gain reduction. I didn't tweak much more, but we can see we can get to -6 finally, which was the target for that track. And we can see the stereo image is quite big on this one. There is no phase issues because it's pretty much correlated. 2.5 dB of gain reduction. And this is high voltage, and I hope you like this one.